So first of all, let's talk about these tariffs. What were the tariffs of 1890 and how do they compare to what we're seeing now?
Well, the McKinley Tariffs of 1890 were brought in by, like I said, William McKinley, who at the time was in Congress. And they were about 49.5%, so much larger than what we're dealing with now. And those were because he was what was known as the Napoleon of protectionism. He really wanted to build up the economy of the United States, and he felt like tariffs were a way to do that. And there was another a little bit of, reason for them, and that was to push the annexation of Canada because we were dealing with things like timber rights and fisheries, and McKinley was somebody who truly believed in American expansionism. As president, he actually was the one who brought in Hawaii and Puerto Rico and other places as territories into the United States.
Trump has also stated many times he wants the U.S. to be a manufacturing superpower. But what did McKinley's 50% tariffs do for the American economy?
It didn't do anything great. It actually really hurt the economy. It especially hurt farmers because with the tariffs against Canada, Canada started looking to the United Kingdom or Britain, and we started sending our produce and our livestock and our crops to England rather than down to the United States. So it actually hurt farmers more than anything, and it actually ended up costing him his seat in the 1890 midterms. And then in 1892, the Republicans lost the presidency, the House, both houses. So it actually hurt the Republicans quite a bit, at least in the short term. And it very much hurt the regular consumer and created more inequality in terms of everybody's money.
All right, putting a Canadian lens on this, how did those tariffs impact Canada?
In Canada, we definitely did suffer a bit initially, but again, we started to turn more towards Britain and the rest of the British Empire. And like we're seeing now, it actually caused a wave of nationalism where Canadians started to band together and get angry at the United States and just look somewhere else. And kind of like how we're looking to the European Union now, we just started looking over the Atlantic Ocean towards Britain as a place where we can start sending our goods rather than to the United States. So in the short term, it did hurt us, but we did adapt to it and start to find new trade markets.
Going back to McKinley, if McKinley's tariffs caused an economic downturn in the United States, there was backlash, in fact, against the Republicans. They lost the White House. Why does Trump put McKinley's presidency on such a pedestal? And to remind everybody, he talked about this in his inauguration address. He has renamed a mountain Mount McKinley. He really holds President McKinley in high regard. Where does this come from?
I think President Trump takes bits and pieces from history without looking at the total facts. And obviously, McKinley came back from losing a seat and became president in 1897. But I think one thing that Trump really looks at is how McKinley expanded the United States with the territories of Puerto Rico, Hawaii, in the Philippines, all over the place. And I think that's what he's really looking at. I think he's ignoring what actually happened with the economy. I mean, McKinley was assassinated by somebody who was looking at the inequality between the rich and the poor, and I think he ignores those and just looks at the brighter spots of what he believes is McKinley's presidency.
There's no denying that there was a short boost. You've got this expansionism. We did see America becoming this industrial leader, but economists are also quick to point out that the Industrial Revolution also played a role in this economic boost and this trajectory. So what was the reason for America's growth at the time? Was it the money coming in from tariffs? Was it the Industrial Revolution, or was it both?
I think it was probably both. At the time, we didn't have things like income tax, so we used tariffs. Even Canada had tariffs. We had the national policy, which had tariffs on things coming in from the United States, not to the degree of the McKinley tariffs, but again, that was to promote east-west trade and to build up our own economy and our own manufacturing sector. So tariffs were something that you would use to help with that. Obviously, it's very different now because we have free trade, and we didn't have that back then. And even any kind of talk of free trade with the United States usually would cost a party the election. And so I believe that, in Canada, it was something that tariffs were just seen as something that you had to have. But in terms of the tariffs that McKinley was putting in of 49.5%, it was seen as horribly excessive.
So when he characterizes this, as I'm sure we'll hear a lot on what he is calling Liberation Day, as America becoming a superpower, of this being their golden age of expansion and new riches for America, how do you view that?
I don't think it's going to happen that way at all. I think that even if we look at the 1890s or in the 1920s when tariffs were again boosted up, in both times it hurt the economy, it hurt the parties that were in charge. And when it was put against Canada, it really just had Canada looking elsewhere. And obviously back then we only had a few trading partners, primarily in the British Empire, whereas now we have a world trading network, and things are very different now than they were in the 1890s, where Trump is looking for inspiration.
Craig Baird, historian and host of Canadian History X podcast. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate your perspective.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up after